we on? Okay. I kind of beat up on Disney a little bit earlier, but some of the old movies are really great, aren't they? Some of those classics. One of those movies that I liked when I was a kid was Aladdin. And, you know, Aladdin is this movie of this boy who's poor, who gets a visit of a genie and has an opportunity to make, I think it's three wishes, right? And the whole kind of movie goes around that idea of the genie, and it's a lot of fun, and there's music and all that kind of stuff. But it actually doesn't start there. The idea of a genie, it actually comes from ancient, not even Islam, but Muslim culture, pre-Islamic. The idea of a jinn, which we probably consider closer to a demon. But anyways, the idea was that they were often incarcerated, and they, like in the spirit world, they could come out and give wishes to people, and there's all these stories. So if you've ever read The 1001 Nights, it's actually a great read, but don't give it to your kids. There's some fascinating stories there, let's say, and one of them is Aladdin. Here's the thing, though. I don't believe that it came out of Arabic culture. I think the original genie in a bottle comes from Solomon. Let me take you to where that is. One day, Solomon is having a dream, and God appears to him. True story, not a make-believe story, not some fantastical thing. A true story of a future king, a young man called Solomon, a man who would have to battle with a lot of challenges because he is the son of Bathsheba, of a very dubious history. We know what we're talking about. And but David was going to back him. Nathaniel, ironically, the one who called out the sin, was also backing this and was going to make it happen, but it was going to be a turbulent time. He'd have a lot to prove. David had been a great king despite a lot of challenges in his country, and there had been wars, and there had been an attempt to usurp the power. It was very up and down. David also had this dream of building the temple, remember? So his son would have to follow in the footsteps of David. When you say that he had to fill giants' feet, I think it's fitting that David took down Goliath and became, in a sense, a giant. And so Solomon, I believe, is worried. I believe he's nervous. I believe he's a thoughtful man, but he also realizes this is too big for me. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm getting into. How am I going to be a great king? And he has a dream, and God tells him, I will give you whatever you want. So it's not Aladdin. It's not the Arabian Nights. This is real life, real history. This is God appearing to man and giving him, as far as I know, the only time in history, this opportunity. And you put yourself in that shoe and say, what would you ask for? Kind of a dangerous question, huh? What would you ask for? What would Solomon ask for? Of course, the first intent is always to think about yourself. You're like, well, what do I want? What do I want to get, Yeah, just a room piled with gold, nothing big, God. All the power, to be beloved by everyone. I don't know, fame and fortune. What would you ask for? Would you even think about others? No, world peace. Yeah, come on, guys. Let's get real. And Solomon asked for a discerning mind. If you read the passage, and we'll do some extra work on Wednesdays, and we'll look at this passage a little bit closer, but he asks for a discerning mind because he realizes he is too small to be over such a great people. What an incredible answer. There's a reason why God allowed Solomon to answer that question instead of us, because all of us would have asked for a pile of gold. I'm probably exaggerating, but most of us wouldn't have put country and world situations in front of our own needs. Solomon already showed the great quality of realizing he served the people of Israel, and he was under the divine both blessing and judgment, and he wanted to honor his God. And he answered, I want a discerning mind to know how to lead this people. What an incredible answer. Now, we call that wisdom. We said, Solomon asked for wisdom. Actually, according to the text, he didn't ask for wisdom exactly. But you can understand the general wording. The general idea could be wisdom is to take what you know and make wise decisions. Among the choices available, you make the best decision. That's probably an okay definition of wisdom, and it comes from God. That's the other definition. It's not just knowledge. It's not accumulation of intellect. It's not PhDs at the end of your name. It's great knowledge and, in a sense, a great moral compass to make the best decision. That's an okay definition of wisdom. All right, so I know you guys are going to be like, that's not, well, okay, that's my definition. Let's go with that. And then all of a sudden we get to see the story of Solomon. We get to see the wonders and the greatness and the power and the wealth. And God says, because you've chosen a discerning mind, I'm also going to give you the things you didn't ask for. I'm going to give you power. I'm going to give you prosperity. I'm going to make you like no one has ever been. And the story of Solomon, the true story, is one that really, I think, sticks in our imagination of, wow, the man who had everything. He had youth and power and wealth. One of the funny things is that people fight all their lives to get rich, and then they're too old to enjoy it. And then the people who are old have all the power and all the money, but they don't have the strength to enjoy it. And then the young people, it's just this rat race, and it's all weird. But Solomon got the best of both worlds. He got the power and the wealth and the health and the youth and all these years to live. And you say, what are you going to do with this opportunity? Well, part of our study of Ecclesiastes is a study of Solomon. We're going to study the life of Solomon with the book of Ecclesiastes together, because it really, in a way, is his diary. It's his opening up his heart to his great wisdom, to his great philosophy, that it will leave us dumbfounded more often than not, and that's okay, because we didn't get that gift that he got. So we're going to be listening to a true Einstein, and Einstein would humble himself before this man, because Solomon was the wisest man to ever live. Okay? After the Lord Jesus Christ, of course, that caveat is obvious. But Jesus Christ is God, so it's hard to beat that one. Other than that, Solomon is him. He is the greatest. So we take an opportunity and to take heed to listen to him. And as we jump into the book of Ecclesiastes, come on, buddy. Let me try that button. We're putting the first title, Chasing the Wind. Chasing the Wind is the title for our first message. We're going to do a 4-part series, 2 in a row, and then we're going to have a little break because we have to be somewhere else, and we're going to do 2 again. So hopefully we'll be able to continue the thought process even while we're away. I would recommend that you read this book, that you meditate on it, that you think through it. And what I'm going to hope to do today is talk about some of the problems with the book. Because a lot of us don't like reading this book. A lot of us get nervous reading this book because we don't understand who wrote it, why he wrote it, and some of the mistranslations that kind of put us down the wrong road right at the outset. Actually, from the very first verse, a lot of us read the book wrong, not because we read it wrong, because it's poorly translated. And I love translations. I look at all the translations, but they're human, they err, and some things could be done a little bit better. And Solomon, Ecclesiastes is one of the books where they really, I think, get it wrong, and it makes a problem for us. So let's look at this. Solomon had a gift of wisdom, of great knowledge, great understanding, time on his hands, money, opportunity. And he was a man who would think and meditate and process. So he was the world's greatest philosopher. You know, the statue of the Greek man sitting on his sitting down and putting his elbow down on his knee and his hand on his chin. It's the thoughtful man, the thinking man, the meditative man. It's what separates us from the animals. To have a soul, to have thought process, to say, who are we? Why are we here? What is our purpose? How do we satisfy the longings of our soul? What happens after death? This is not a question that the animal world asks, because they do not have a soul. So Solomon is the height of man. He is the height of philosophy. He is the height of what man can do with his brain capacity. So we talk about, we use 10% of our brain. I don't know how they get with that statistic. But, Solomon was the guy who used 100, okay? And where does it go? What questions can he answer? What can he enlighten us? So I think Proverbs is the book that says, listen to the wise man. The wise man listens to be a wise person doesn't mean you're super, super smart. It means you're willing to learn. You're willing to grow. You're willing to be challenged. So I say to sit under the tutelage of the teacher, Solomon, to listen to his words, to see his musings, to try to follow his process is a really wonderful thing. Now, you're also going to find something else in Ecclesiastes, similar to when you read, for example, C.S. Lewis. I remember talking to my dad a lot about C.S. Lewis, and he just loves reading C.S. Lewis, Not the Narnia series, great, but that's the fiction side. The nonfiction, Mere Christianity, Screwtape Letters, The Great Divorce. There's some incredible books. I've read almost all of them, and if I get through a chapter and I understood his process from beginning to end, I pat myself on the shoulder. I'm like, good job, Chris. You did a good job today. That guy had another level of intellect, another level of thinking, of processing, of digging in. I used to do some discipleship with some young guys at my Bible college, and we'd read through Mere Christianity, and we would read a paragraph, and they'd have to dissect it and think about it and come back, and almost every single time they'd get it wrong. And I'm like, oh my goodness. Part of it's the Old English and everything, but just the ability to stop and think and meditate and break things down is almost lost on us today. We're such a fast culture. We're so much into on the TV, the 30-second Instagram reel. Everything is fast and quick. We don't stop and think. Solomon is the man who stopped and thought about the questions we should think about. The fact that we go through life not asking ourselves who we are. Why are we here? What do we believe? How do we find true joy? How do we find true purpose? What happens after death are questions even Christians barely graze. If heaven, here's just one idea. If heaven is real, really real, sounds stupid to say. If you would be 100% certain that the moment you pass that veil, you enter heaven, how would it change the way you live today? A lot of us don't. We talk about heaven, but do we live like we're going to heaven? A lot of us could be accused of being practical atheists, of living like there's no God, but coming to church and saying, oh, well. And that's the problem for all of us, because we live in the here and now. We live in the rat race. We live in the material world. So here's what Solomon does. He asks those questions that are not comfortable, and he tries to answer them. And you know what's funny? The wisest man in the world doesn't get him all right. Not right, but he doesn't get the answers, because some of those answers are too far away, but they're still worth asking. So that's what we're going to do in the book of Ecclesiastes. It's a wonderful book. I've loved this book. I've meditated on this, thought on this book so much, and yet I'm still overwhelmed by so many things in it. So let's start. Let's stop yapping, that's me, and let's start listening to the teacher. Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verses 1 through 11. We're going to go through chapters 1 and 2 today. The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. That's a bad translation. It is not vanity, but we'll come back to that. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What does a man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The translation there actually should be a long time. It's interesting. It actually doesn't say eternal in the Hebrew, from what I have heard, understand. The sun rises and the sun goes down and hastens to the place where it rises. The wind blows to the south and goes around to the north. And around goes the wind, and on its circuits the wind returns. That's actually science right there, but we're not going to look into that. There's some beautiful science in here as well. All streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, there they will flow again. That's science again. We know about this evaporation and the cloud formation and the rain, and it fills the lakes that feed the rivers, that feed the ocean, and then it starts all over again. Solomon was way ahead of his time. But he's also pointing at something else. It's the cycle of life, not the Lion King cycle of life. I'm talking about how everything just goes in this cycle. All things are full of weariness. A man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear with hearing. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done, and there is nothing new under the sun. Is there something which can be said, see, this is new? So, well, maybe AI or something. And we kind of get confused. But human nature, human problems, human sin is the same old, same old. The root problems have not changed. We've become so intelligent, so dynamic, but we haven't ended world hunger. How funny, huh? We have all the same problems we suffered with at the beginning, the dawn of creation, murder, Cain and Abel. Murder someone else. They burned them alive in a New York subway. The most successful city in the world, and someone burned someone alive in our subway system. Have we learned nothing? What has happened will happen again. Maybe you guys didn't hear that news, but that happened a while back. That was horrible. And everybody stood and took their phones and said, oh, how terrible. Anyways. If there's something which can be said, see, this is new. It has been done already in the ages before us. There is no remembrance of former things, and there will be no remembrance of latter things yet to be among those who come after. If you read this text with the precursor vanity, you understand that this book begins teaching a nihilistic philosophy. Okay, nihilism is the logical end to atheism. Okay? I almost became an atheist halfway through Bible college. As funny as that sounds, some of you guys know that story about me. And I read a lot about this. Part of the reason that atheism turned me off was because it borrowed from other philosophies when things got tough. So it didn't have genuine answers to the questions. So it talked about, we're just animals. But then we want love, we want hope, we want future. We have this idea of moral good and bad. And of course, C.S. Lewis bashed a lot of that idea in Mere Christianity. He says, why are you talking about these things when you don't believe in these things? Like, you read the first pages of Richard Dawkins, the great atheist, and he writes the introduction to his most famous book, talking about how evil God is, a God that he says doesn't exist. I'm so angry at this God that doesn't exist. Or like, get a life, man. Like, what an absolute idiot. It's so dumb. But the other thing is this. An atheist needs to admit, if this is all there is, and all there was, all there ever will be, a material-only world, then our understanding is that history has no purpose, current life has no purpose, and the future has no hope. Therefore, you should be dead instead of alive. It would be better to die or not to have been born than to live. That a lot of atheists can't wrap their minds around that, and there are a lot of young people are seduced by the I would call it actually theology because it's non-theology. It's backwards of the understanding of the divine and eternity. And it tries to explain this world, but it fails miserably. I'll never forget a lot of atheists in Europe. It's kind of taken over a lot of the young minds. It's really sad. It's really broken. And I remember talking to a young lady who was an atheist, self-described full atheist. And I asked her a very simple question. I said, how happy would you say you are most of the time? Put a percentage on it. Let's do math. It says, how happy are you as opposed to sad or as opposed to just not happy or sad, just in the middle? How much of that time are you actually happy? She said maybe 10% of the time. Do you believe that in the future you will achieve greater happiness and that will overcome the sadness or be more than half? She says, no, I don't believe that. That's impossible. So I told her, so therefore you're telling me the pursuit of life for an atheist, and I would actually argue for everyone, is the pursuit of happiness. Now, I'm going to dig into that later, so don't get scared about, like, whoa, it's Jesus. Okay, no, we're not going to do Sunday school answers. We're trying to listen to Solomon. The purpose of life is to be fully, truly, eternally happy. And you're telling me that your atheism has led you to 10% or less happiness, and misery and suffering or just nothingness the rest of the time. And there was no hope for you after you die, and there were no consequences after you die, and you believe that if you died today, there is nothing else after death, right? She says yes. So the best thing for you is to take a gun and shoot yourself, because there is nothing here for you. And I said, I'm not telling you that because I want you to shoot yourself. I want you to realize where atheism takes you. If you are a true atheist, then this life is worthless, useless, meaningless. And yet you will not do it. Says, will you do it? Knowing all this, she told me, she says, I know you're right. And I says, so will you go shoot yourself? She says, no. I says, why not? I don't know. As I quoted her Ecclesiastes chapter 3, for he has put eternity in their hearts. For man know they will live forever. So the idea that Ecclesiastes is a book of nihilism is not right. That is a misunderstanding, and it's sad. Because part of the reason is that word vanity is very hard to translate. But that word should not have been translated that way. And almost in all the different texts and all the different translations, it doesn't happen. The word in Hebrew is havel. I rarely ever quote to you guys something in Hebrew or Greek because I'm not that kind of person. But this is important. The word havel is translated as vapor, smoke, or the thinnest of vapors. That's the word. So you can realize why they have such a hard time getting it into text. Because they're trying to explain something that is not in the English language. It is the idea that, it says, vanity of vanities. In other words, the thinnest, so vapor, and when it repeats it, the vapor of vapors. The thinnest of vapors, says the preacher. Thinnest of vapors. All is vapor. Or, I would like to say, cloud. That's the word that really comes to my mind. I think we have an opportunity today that a lot of maybe the ancients didn't know about. One of the most wonderful things in creation is a cloud. Have you ever flown in an airplane? And I wonder if they ever thought about that. Can I just go up there and grab that thing, What is it like to walk on top of it, And then you watch the old Disney movies and stuff. Yeah. No. Have you ever been in an airplane? I remember going through an airplane and it's raining and it's thundering and it's cloudy and it's just drenching this plane. Of course, you can't feel it because you're eating peanuts, whatever. But you're watching through the window and then all of a sudden you go through this cloud and it's like, boom. It's white. It's beautiful. And then all of a sudden you go through and you see sunshine. And you're like, where'd the water go? Where'd the rain go? Where'd the lightning go? You're like, so our scientists, they make a big deal and a big fuss about how much they know. I'm going to tell you, they don't know half as much as they think they know. Man, it's awesome. Some of the wonders of creation that we still don't have an idea about. It's like you wish. So basically the idea of vapor of vapors is Solomon is like the guy in an airplane who is able to open the window in one of those old propeller planes. He sticks a plastic bag out, grabs a piece of cloud, ties it up, and takes it down to his office to study. That's what Solomon is trying to do. And when he opens it up, he says, where did it go? Where'd the rain and the thunder and the clouds go? So we know it's there. We know its purpose. We know its power. Hurricane Helene reminded us that there is power in the clouds. And yet you can't take that home and do it again. The fact of the matter that one lightning bolt, the statistic, I don't remember it perfectly, but something like one lightning bolt could power New York City for 10 years. That's pretty wild. We have no idea how to do that. We have no idea to understand, to manufacture, to capture, all that different things. So that's what Solomon is trying to do. He's trying to do the impossible. He's trying to study clouds. Now you say, wait, he's a scientist? Well, yeah, he was a scientist. But I'm talking philosophically. He is trying to tell us life has purpose. We know this. We are made to live forever. We know this. These are solid, known facts. As humans, our number one desire is to find the purpose of life. And the purpose of life, in very simple terms, which the highest philosophers will all agree on, is to be happy. Even Christians, we understand this. We don't call it happiness, we call it joy. Because we understand that happiness comes and goes and it fluctuates up and down. But eternity is a gift that God gives those who are saved, and it's joy forever. That's what we long for. That's what we desire. And in this world, we're trying to glimpse that joy. We're trying to glimpse that happiness. We're trying to glimpse purpose and future. And some of us call it, we want to leave a legacy. Oh, we want to make money. Oh, we want to be important. And we're all seeking, and we're seeking in a material world trying to fill an immaterial void. So you remember, if you ever hear Billy Graham or something, or all the great evangelists that say, you have a God-shaped void. This is where it comes from. This is that idea. Toiling after the wind, chasing after the wind, seeking after the wind. It's this rat race of people saying, if only I had that, I'd be happy. If only I found that, I'd be satisfied. If only she married me, or I had this job, or I had this much money, or if I was recognized, or if I was this tall, or if I was this young, then. And Solomon says, let me just tell you something, he said. I got to the top, and there's nothing. That's a harsh reality. And usually when men and women find that out, they're too old to make a difference anymore. And the young guys are like, yeah, we're going to change the world. Good luck, buddy. But again, not nihilism. So Solomon says, don't stop trying to pursue joy. Don't stop trying to work. Don't stop having a family. Don't stop finding love. But understand, it will not fully satisfy you because you are made to live forever. So the material world cannot fill the immaterial void. So he's starting us out with this understanding that there is this cloud we call purpose. We know it's there, we know it has purpose, but men have failed for generation after generation trying to figure out, why are we here? How do we become happy? How do we enter eternity and have eternal joy? Now, I'll give you a hint. As Christians, we actually have answers to these questions. But they came from Jesus, didn't they? They come. It's a great gift. But you see that this man is struggling and striving without the knowledge we have. And he's doing the very best that he can with the knowledge that he can to understand these questions. And that brings up the second great important problem with the book of Ecclesiastes. So let me just go back to the word havel. So havel, cloud, thinnest of vapors, smoke, words like that are used to explain this word. That word havel appears 38 times in the book of Ecclesiastes. So it is the crucial foundational word. So again, if you have a negative view of the word, you're going to read the book as nihilistic. You're going to read the book as negative, depressive. You're like, so why do we even get out of bed? Like, everything is vanity. Let's just stay in bed. Let's all just rot. He says, have you ever read that in the Bible? Like, sleep all day. You know, Solomon's the one that says, get up from your bed, you sluggard. Look at the ant. So, of course, no, we're not, this is a wrong understanding from the get-go. So, I'm trying to help you. No, the word havel is neutral. It's not positive, it's not negative. It is a searching for truth. And it is a journey that the entire book goes on, if you'd be honest. And if you read the very end, which you can, you'll realize that he tries to do in the best he can to answer that question. And now I keep using the word best he can. That brings us to the second great challenge in the book of Ecclesiastes. And it is a phrase that appears over and over again, says, under the sun. It is very important to understand that Solomon is trying the best he can with the greatest capacity and wisdom and philosophy and knowledge that any man has ever had. Now, he probably could have used some computers and some AI and stuff. It would have helped him out. But again, the Bible says he's the wisest man of all times. And he's trying to answer the hardest questions. But here's the kicker. When he says under the sun, what he's trying to explain to us is that sometimes as Christians, when there are big, difficult questions, we like to use what I call squirrel answers. You ever been in Sunday school and the teacher asks a question and the kid keeps answering, Jesus, Jesus. Eventually one of them is going to be Jesus. It's the squirrel answer. It's the easy answer. It's the cop-out answer. It's not wrong, but it doesn't have depth. It doesn't have substance. So what Solomon is trying to do is explain to us, sometimes we get these cheesy little answers to really big, difficult questions. Big, difficult questions deserve big, difficult answers. You know, here's considered the most difficult question in world history. And I'm going to go on a little bit of a rabbit trail. The most difficult question in the world history is considered, why do bad things happen to good people? Now, the question in and of itself is flawed because there are no good people. And you say, where in the Bible can I answer that question? Well, you got a real messy book like the book of Job that does a very good job of explaining that. And it's 40-some chapters long. And most of us are like, this is hard. This is too difficult. So big, difficult answers require big, difficult questions require big answers. And what's funny is when God appears on the scene in Job, he doesn't answer the question, does he? You're like, this is the time for God to tell us the purpose of life and why we suffer. And God says, look at the clouds. It's actually what he tells him. He says, what? I need an answer. I find it beautiful and very wonderful that the most difficult question in the world isn't answered pen to paper. It's answered by blood on a cross. The only good man to ever live had the worst of evil happen to him. Why? Because God so loved the world. The gospel is the answer to the most difficult question in the world. He says, humans started it, I will resolve it. That's what God says. That's what the cross means to us, that God became man, that men could become sons of God. That's why we talk about it over and over again, because it is such a deep question and it deserves such a deep answer. And that's why the gospel has so many facets, because it is the answer. But it's not just, grace. There is depth to that. So that's what Solomon is trying to help us do. He says, don't use the cheat code. Don't go to the Jesus answer. How do we find happiness? Give your life to Jesus, you're going to be in heaven. Okay, I get it. That's a good answer. But why? How do we get to that conclusion? How do we answer that question? So what Solomon is doing, he's saying, I'm going to use the full extent of my brain to try to find how can a man be happy under the sun. No cheat codes, under the sun. Everything that is under the material realm. And I'm going to battle and struggle. And now Solomon will point to the eternal. He will. But he wants us to really think through the process. Again, in a world where in America we want everything fast, everything quick, Solomon does the hard work. Verse 12 to 18. I, the preacher, have been king over Israel and Jerusalem, and I applied my heart to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. That's basically what we just talked about. It is an unhappy business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. You see that? The animal world's not dealing with this. They're not stressed out about what is the purpose of life. They're just eating the bananas off the tree and swimming in the river. They're not worried about these things. We are. It is an unhappy business. We are condemned, in a sense, to have to deal with this. Well, why? Well, because one day our forefathers disobeyed God in the Garden of Eden. And we've been searching for purpose and value ever since. We've been trying to get back home ever since. That's the story of the Bible. That's the story of humanity. God gave us free will. We ruined that. And now we've been on a constant search for how to get back home. It's an unhappy business, he says. I have seen everything that is done under the sun, and behold, all is vapor, and striving after the wind, or chasing the wind, looking for that. What is crooked cannot be made straight. What is lacking cannot be counted. I said in my heart, I have acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who were over Jerusalem before me, and my heart has had great experience of wisdom and knowledge, and I applied my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. In other words, he says, I looked in every crevice, every single corner to find the answers to this question. And it's interesting that he says, I also looked in madness and folly. You say, you're not going to find anything good in there. But here's the thing. I'll get to that in a little bit. But being extremely wise isn't the end all either. It's one of the very interesting things. He says, to be extremely wise or extremely holy in your own eyes actually doesn't lead to happiness either, in and of itself. Very fascinating. But of course, he did it all, and he can tell us from experience. I perceive that this is but a striving after the wind. For in much wisdom is much vexation, and he who increases in knowledge increases sorrow. Some of the happiest people among us are the people who don't ask these questions. Whatever. Carefree people. I've always felt that I was an old man in a young man's body. My wife often says that. I think way too much. I overanalyze way too much. I ask myself these questions. That's why I like the book of Ecclesiastes. But you know what? I just wish I could not have to think about these things and just eat and drink and whatever and put it on the credit card and whatever, man. Like the surfer dude. Yeah, whatever, man. Problem is, it haunts me. When I die, what happens? Was I right? Is God real? Is Christianity the way to God? Is Christ the way to God? What I do in this life resonates for eternity. Am I wasting my life? It haunts me. I can't go to bed and just say, whatever, man. Cool, bro. I can't live that way. And I think that's how men were supposed to live. Men and women were supposed to live. We're supposed to be haunted by eternity. We're supposed to be haunted by what happens if I'm wrong. What happens if I don't believe in God? What happens if I live all my sinful way? What happens? We have to ask these questions. Animals don't have to deal with this. This is the sad affair men have to deal with. And let me tell you something else. Satan wants to turn us all into that whatever, bro type of people. Whatever, man. Church? Yeah, whatever, man. I'll go when I'm older, man. Who cares, bro? Of course, we don't all sound like that, but a lot of people do, don't they? A lot of people think that way. It's not a big deal. It's just religion. Something you do on Sundays. It's life or death. It's the most important questions of mankind. It's supposed to haunt us. until we find answers. It's why Jesus says, and you will search the truth, and the truth will set you free. You don't get to run away from this. You go to a funeral, and you got your atheist friend and your Mormon friend. They got to see that body go down, and they have to ask themselves, what happened to them? Where did they go? Why am I crying? What is this I am feeling? They have to feel it because God has said, I will not let you rest. You know why? Because God loves us. That's why. God didn't care. He'd be like, build and destroy and eat and drink and who cares? Society can go to pot. Every man for himself. And that's at the heart of evolution. Do you realize that? We're just sophisticated monkeys, survival of the fittest, kill or be killed. But here's the thing. Society in reality does not function that way. Evolution contradicts himself because we are looking for morality. We are looking for hope. We are looking for love. We are looking for purpose and value, and we should not sleep until we find it. And that's the unhappy business men should be haunted with. And most in this world are not. And they're going to wake up one day and say, I've wasted it. I've wasted my life. That's why Solomon is talking to us. That's why he spent his entire life trying to answer those questions, because he could not sleep until he did. He didn't even put it, notice he didn't say he put his mind to it. He repeats twice, he put his heart to it. He put all of his intellectual ability, but his whole soul was invested in, I need to know why. That doesn't mean you're going to get the answers necessarily, but it is a worthwhile purpose, and it is of great value. So let's see the diary of Solomon. Let's see where he looked and what crannies he looked. And let's just read through a good portion of chapter 2, but you're going to see a little bit of everything. How he is looking for the purpose, and it is something that burdens him. I said in my heart, come now, I will test you with pleasure. Enjoy yourself. And behold, this also was vapor. In other words, there is value in pleasure, but it is not all satisfying. It doesn't fill the void. That's what he's trying to tell us. It wasn't enough. I said, of laughter, it is mad, and of pleasure, of what use is it? I searched with my heart how to cheer my body with wine, my heart guiding me with wisdom, and I laid hold on folly till I might see what is good for the children of man to do under heaven during the few days of life. So we have life. How do we best use our time? A lot of us just say, well, I have to pay the bills. I better go to Walmart and work. Solomon had a choice. Do you realize? He was incredibly wealthy, incredibly powerful, incredibly famous. He could do whatever he wanted, and he was sitting around saying, I get to choose what to do. What do I do? And so he said, well, I'm going to try wine. I'm going to try pleasure. I'm going to try parties. I'm going to try girls. I'm going to try incredible building projects. I'm going to try for world peace. I'm going to try all the things that he set his mind to. And here's the thing. He says those had value, but they did not satisfy. A lot of us are stuck in a rat race because we don't even get to choose. You just have to pay the bills. Solomon had an opportunity, and that's where the diary comes in. And he got to go in every single direction his heart pleased. He says, I made great works. I built houses and planted vineyards for myself. I made for myself gardens and parks and planted them with all kinds of fruit trees. I made myself pools from which to water the forests of growing trees. I bought male and female slaves, and I had slaves who were born in my house. I also had great possessions of herds and flocks, more than any who were before me in Jerusalem. I also gathered for myself silver and gold and the treasure of kings and provinces. I got singers, both men and women, and many concubines. Yeah, not a few. Like 1,300 wives. Hello. The delight of the children of men. So the most beautiful women, the most beautiful palaces, the greatest entertainment. So I became great and surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me. And whatever my eye desired, I did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure, for my heart found pleasure in all my toil. So there's a hint there. If world was vanity, why is he finding pleasure in his toil? He says, the act of working hard, of investing, of planting, of growing, of architecture, there is pleasure in that toil, but it's not an all-satisfying pleasure. Understand? It comes and then it goes. You build something, then a fire happens and it falls down. So it's not eternal happiness. It is temporary happiness. So Solomon says there is value, but it's temporary. It doesn't fulfill everything. That's what so again, it's not nihilistic, this book, but it's realistic. I kept my heart, found pleasure in my toil, and this was my reward for all my toil. Then I considered all that my hands had done. So I imagined him standing on top of his palace and looking out at the wonderful works and the beautiful streets and all the people doing the market and how much money so many people had made, and maybe the arches and the greenery and the gardens all around Jerusalem. And he looks up there and he says, man, I really made it. Really elevated, really did something good, really served my people, really poured everything into making this country great. And behold, all was vapor and a striving after wind, and there was nothing to be gained under the sun. He says, I thought that was it. I thought I'd made it. I thought I had used the extent of my knowledge, and now I would be happy and fulfilled, and I would sit in my chair and say, I did it, nothing else can be added to it. And he says, no, not true. Even a man who did good, it wasn't enough to be the greatest philanthropist, if you can consider that way. And so his mood shifts. Maybe you could call it a midlife crisis. A darkness starts to consume him, and he starts to get worried and nervous. He says, I got all this gift from God, all this opportunity, but I'm not happy. I'm not satisfied. I can't find the solution. Just read what he says. I'm talking for him. Let him talk. So I turned to consider wisdom and madness and folly. For what can a man do who comes after the king? He says, I have so much power and opportunity, and yet I'm not satisfied. How can I lead my people to happiness? Only what has been done. Then I saw that there was more to gain in wisdom than folly. So again, he's making a differentiation. He is saying, I can't tell you that this gives ultimate purpose, but I can tell you it is better to be wise than to be a fool. I can tell you there is greater value in being wise than to be a fool. So read the book of Proverbs. He literally wrote a book on it. As there is more to gain in light than in darkness. The wise person has eyes in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. And yet I perceived that the same event happened to them all. And this was the chilling, haunting reality for him. What is the same thing that happens to them all? Death. Then I said in my heart, what happens to the fool will also happen to me. Why then have I been so very wise? And I said in my heart, or in the mind, that this is also vapor. For of the wise as of the fool there is no enduring remembrance, seeing that is in the days to come, all that will be long forgotten. There's nothing left that Solomon built, you know. I think there's a little tiny piece of something in the valley of Kidron Valley. There's a little something he built. That's it. Everything else is gone from Solomon. The greatest king to ever live. How the wise dies just like the fool. So I hated life, because what is done under the sun was grievous to me. For all is vapor and a striving after the wind. And it's something he can't shake. Now I want to read this last piece for you, and this is where we're going to end, up to verse 23. I hated all my toil in which I had toil under the sun, seeing that I must leave it to the man who will come after me. And who knows whether he will be wise or a fool. Yet he will be master of all which I toiled, and under my wisdom, under the sun. This also is vapor. So I turned about and gave my heart up to despair over all the toils of my labors under the sun, because sometimes a person who has toiled with wisdom and knowledge and skill must leave everything to be enjoyed by someone who did not toil for it. This also is vapor and a great evil. What has a man from all his toil and striving of heart, which he toils under the sun? It sounds very much to verse 3 at the very beginning of this book. He's kind of making full circle here. What is the purpose of it all? For all his days are full of sorrow. All his work is a vexation. Even in the night his heart does not rest. That haunting nature of what am I doing with my life? This also is vapor. He says, I was the smartest guy. I don't know. I don't have an answer. You know who became king after him? One of the biggest fools in history. Rehoboam. Imagine how much that hurt him. The wisest man and his son was an absolute idiot. Sorry to use that word, but that word doesn't fit. It's far greater, far more terrible. He says, I worked so hard, I did so much, I built so many things. You know what's interesting? How easy it is to build something, how hard it is to build, how easy it is to destroy. Remember this one video of this one guy who had all these little cups, and he built this whole thing in the entire house, and he filled it up with cups, and it was really ornate, and it took him hours and hours and hours. And a kid comes in and just swipes it, and the whole thing falls down, and he's like so upset. Isn't that just life? And it can get to you, it can depress you, it can sadden you, it can harden you. Under the sun, he was hopeless. So what Solomon is saying is if you live your life as if there is no God, as if there is no eternity, you should despair. You should be absolutely haunted. You should be broken. Because if there is, all there ever was, all there ever will be, like the atheists say, then life is meaningless and life is vanity. But Solomon didn't say vanity, did he? He said vapor. He said vapor. Because he says, I know life has a purpose. I know there is more to this life. But he says, honestly, as smart as I am, I'm not enough. I can't explain this. Really what he's saying, he's setting us up for the Lord Jesus Christ. He's setting us up for the gospel. He's setting us up for the answers that God gives, as his ways are above our ways. So he is what he's doing in chapter 1 and 2 is telling us there is a desire to know. There is a drive of those who are wise to find purpose and to find value. And what he's trying to do is to try to help us get our heads out of the rain and the thunder and the thick darkness and rise through the cloud. And saying, if this is all there is under the sun, then yeah, it's not enough. We need to admit that. There's people who, even some people who preach the gospel, like, you have a good life, everything is fine. All you need is Jesus like a cherry on top. No. If we do not have Christ, our life is worthless, devoid of all purpose, of all value, of all eternity, and there is terrible darkness ahead. That is the reality. That's what haunted him. And he said, I need to get this right. So in a sense, it's almost an evangelistic call to say, we need to answer these questions, otherwise our life is wasted, our time is wasted. You know, we have a gift to have understood things that even the great Solomon didn't understand. Because wisdom doesn't come from man, it comes from God. And he showed us that one day Jesus Christ came to this terrible world, under the sun. He bled and he died, and he suffered, but he rose again. And he gave us hope. He gave us a future. He helped us understand that life, the vapor we're looking for, the hope we're looking for, the fulfillment we're looking for, is a God-shaped void. C.S. Lewis said it beautifully. If I find in myself a desire which this world cannot satisfy, it's because I was made for another world. We're supposed to embrace the fact that we're incomplete. We're supposed to embrace the fact that there's no amount of jobs or money or recognition or health or fame that can satisfy us. It will never satisfy. And that can either depress you and break you or help you realize, but, and here's the kicker, God is telling us, if you understand that after this temporary life comes eternal life, you realize that what you invest, what you plant, what you sow, you will profit in eternity. That what is done for Christ lasts forever. Therefore, the material world must be invested into the eternal world. That what is temporary must be spent on what is eternal. What things last forever? Not your Mercedes-Benz and not your house. But your wife, your kids, your neighbors, your church family, your holiness to the Lord. True holiness, not fake Phariseeism full of knowledge. He tells us, be careful of too much knowledge because you get all think you're something. No, you're nothing. True holiness, true righteousness, true pursuit of godliness, knowing that it's not what my neighbor thinks of me, it's what God thinks of me. And to try to honor Him, try to live for Him, and try to know that what is done in this life for Christ resonates for eternity. So he says, for man knows that he is made to live forever. Eternity in their hearts. That is something men intrinsically know. Solomon doesn't even debate. He doesn't try to convince people. He says, you just know. That's why this haunts you. That's why this questions. And many people turn their backs, many even Christians. Brother and sister, you are going to die one day. When you arrive at the throne of God, what will He say of you? What will He see of what you receive? Talents and gifts and times and family and opportunity and money. All this stuff, turn it into eternal bricks of gold. You know what I mean? Turn this world's profit into eternal profit. To be recognized by the only voice that matters, by the only time that matters. And of course, we think about what we can give, but now think of what we've received. To be saved, to be loved, and to be promised eternal happiness, joy. What Solomon was longing for and looking for was the next life. Happy, healthy, wealthy, famous, all that stuff. That's real. We long for it because there is a place that can be satisfied. That's not in the material world, it's in the eternal world. What a beautiful thing. Leave you with a verse. I was thinking all week long on what Jesus said. What will it profit a man if he gains the whole world? Sounds like Solomon, huh? On top of his palace, looking at everything he'd done, famous and popular and wealthy, and all the everything. What will it profit a man if he gains the whole world but loses his soul? Another translation says, in another part of the text says, loses himself. I would argue that as Christians, we can't lose our soul, but you can lose your purpose. You can't forget why you were placed on this earth. You're an ambassador for Jesus Christ. You are to live holy, godly lives. You are to love those around you. You are to realize that every single day is one less day left. To leave an eternal legacy. To transition from the earthly to the eternal. I asked you guys at the beginning, how many of us actually believe that heaven is real? Oh yeah, I believe in heaven. Every day, every moment, every decision, every time. If we really truly believe that heaven is real, how would that change our existence today? How would that change that we realize every single day might be our last day? Make it count for eternity, not just for me or for now. We should all have a midlife crisis. We should all be haunted by this as God, I want to honor you. I don't want to invest fear in you, but a sense of urgency. We can do great things for God. What an opportunity. To not just live for the material. Pay your bills. Go to work, all that stuff, but realize the eternal stuff actually matters. The other stuff, it comes and goes. It's just money. Father, we thank you. Thank you for Solomon and all of his wisdom, and yet he plumbed the depths of the questions that we should probably have asked ourselves a lot more. Questions we should ask ourselves every day. What legacy am I leaving? What life am I leading? Am I honoring you, Lord, with everything I have and am and every day? Or am I just living for myself? Living in fear of the government or living in fear of the problems instead of realizing that we're eternal beings on our way home. And while we have life, might we live for your glory and honor, Lord. Help us to have an eternal view on life, not just a temporal, not just an under the sun, but to the endless suns that await us in eternity. In Jesus' name.